Well, folks, we're here with Brendan Dwyer. We've brought him back onto the show.
A lot of people come up to me on the street and say that they thought it was really interesting and that I did a good job, and they liked it. It was a good response.
I thought you did a great job, and for that reason, we've invited you back to see what other fine things you might have in store for us.
Oh, I'm glad to
so
show you.
thank you for coming.
Okay, I'm glad to show you.
All right, well,
Share my
why don't you tell me a
yeah.
little bit about yourself and your background and how you got involved in collecting old envelopes and newspapers and right? Is that right? And stamps too.
And stamps. Right. Probably stems from my my parents and my family. A lot of my aunts and uncles and my parents liked to collect antiques, and so I was brought up around antiques and appreciating old things. And that's probably how it started. Raised in a small country town outside of Hartford.
Mm-hmm. For those people who didn't get to see you the last time, which was about 3 weeks ago, it's always nice to find out about where a person's from,
Right.
And their roots. And okay, so what did you bring today?
Well, since I've been on Nantucket, I've taken a really big interest in the history of Nantucket, and so I visit the local bookstores a lot, and I'll pick up a book on the local history, and it may take me a month or 2 months to read it because I read it a little at a time. But I'll write down clues that will enable me to seek out something, a little piece of that story, like a newspaper or old correspondence. And so the people that write these books have done an awful lot of research, and they've done such a good job that it has sparked my interest to see if I could go out and find something related to that. And so, since I collect newspapers are part of it, and also envelopes. And the first book that I read, I believe, was the story about the bank robbery on Nantucket. And it wasn't really a recent bank robbery. It was in 1795. And I won't tell you the outcome of the story because it's such an interesting story. In that book, they mentioned some of the newspapers that carried articles. Like they quoted a particular issue of a newspaper telling about the court hearings involving the bank robbery. It was $2.50 a year for subscription, and there was a little article in this one that after this issue it was going to be $3 per year. The mentioning of the bank robbery in Nantucket, it's not much, but it says yesterday the Honorable Supreme Judicial Commission or Court was opened in this, and I can't read the word.
What word is that?
Well, they made S's. Their S's looked like F's, except if the S was at the end of a word. It was a plural.
Really?
And so it takes a while to get used to trying to read a lot of the type because of the way the S's look like S's. The unfortunate event of the robbery of the Nantucket Bank will, we learn, come before the grand jury this term. A great number of the inhabitants of Nantucket are in town as evidence. It must be of every patriot that the issue may be such as shall restore confidence in good neighborhood to an and I can't make the word out. So
I see. Okay.
It must have was making reference to how prosperous the island was,
Right,
and how what an unfortunate event this was.
Right.
But that's all of the mention of the bank robbery in this issue, and it's the grand jury hearing coming up.
Why do you like doing this so much? Where does it come from, do you think? Your interest. It's so unique to me. I've never met anyone that ever...
Well, history. Well, I just
You just love history.
Yeah, I like.
This is a
reading.
form of...
Yeah. The only The only fiction that I read is Sherlock Holmes stories.
Okay.
Everything else is has to be nonfiction.
Well, I think I see a connection. Yeah.
I just like reading about. You can get a really good idea about what is happening in the country or a certain area by reading what's going on. But you can tell an awful lot by the ads in newspapers back then.
Yeah.
Like a lot of people, most people then didn't go out and what they call earn a wage like we do today. So we go out and earn a wage and then we buy what we need.
Right.
But back then, they everybody grew their own things that they needed, and anything that they made that was excess, they traded for things. I mean, you could even buy houses for trading with animals instead of cash. And there were a lot of stores in the early 1800s throughout the country that were called the cheap store or the cash store, because a lot of the merchants were vying for cash, and so they would give discounts to anybody that would bring cash in instead of trading goods. So it was common to see the cheap store.
Do you have a few ads that you can just show us? Do you read every paper that you have? It must be difficult to read it.
Yeah, no. I'll read. I'll get a paper because it has an interesting article, and then I'll read that, and then I'll skim through it.
Oh, I see.
And then if it's a stormy night or a winter night, or I'm looking for something to do, I'll whip out one of these old papers and start reading it. And so some of them I never read one all the way through, or it'll take me months to do it. Or maybe a year later I'll discover something. In this newspaper, which is from 1791, it has a house to be sold, and it has a little engraving of it, and it says, "To be sold and entered upon immediately, that large and well-furnished dwelling house in Keene, built by Mr. Chandler. It is nicely opposite the meeting house, lies upon 3 large country roads, and is a most complete and advantageous stand for a merchant in large trade or a public house, lying in pretty town and in the center of the country. It will be sold reasonably, and the pay may be made in money, beef, pork, or pot, or pearl ash." So you can see how you could even purchase a house by trading, beef or pork, because there wasn't much cash around. Getting back to the Massachusetts Spy or the Worcester Gazette, it has an interesting article in it by John Hancock, who was governor of Massachusetts at this time, and he has just made a proclamation to have a day of Thanksgiving, to be thankful for how prosperous the country is and how far the country has proceeded up to that point.
Oh, wow.
And up until that time, there wasn't a national day of Thanksgiving. And when I got this paper and I read that article, I looked up, the history of Thanksgiving. And there was a lady who had a 40-year campaign to try and get the government to have a national day of Thanksgiving. And it took her 40 years to do so. And it wasn't until Abraham Lincoln was president to do it.
But you mean he didn't get it right away?
No, I've read he was just I guess it was a lot of people wanted to have a national holiday, or to have Thanksgiving, but it wasn't a national holiday yet. So some states were enacting it. So there was a slow movement toward having a national holiday, but it wasn't until Abraham Lincoln. So here's a Nantucket newspaper, the Nantucket Enquirer. You may have heard me talk about it before, and this is it was a semi-weekly newspaper, and this particular issue is from Saturday, May 7th, 1836. And here is an ad by a store that says cheap for cash, which is what I was talking about before, about what a lot of stores were called the cheap store or the cash store. And here's a store on Nantucket in the 1830s saying cheap for cash.
Now, what are they? What are the things that we're seeing?
It says Samuel S. Salisbury has just received and offers for sale at the lowest possible prices 100 bags St. Domingo St. Domingo Java and Sumatra coffee.
Wow.
10 boxes of Havana brown sugar, 25 bags of Manila, and it says do, that means ditto, so it would be Manila brown sugar, and then there's baskets of sugar, and what else do they have here? Molasses. This newspaper, as I told you one time before, I saw it in an antique shop in the spring, and I was just hesitant about getting it, and so I went back to Vermont for the summer, and I thought about it all summer.
Did you really?
Yeah. Not every day, but periodically. I never forgot it. And so one of the first things I did when I got back is I went back to the antique shop to see if it was still there, and it was. And that was, at that point, I remembered that 1836 was the Alamo.
Oh.
So I opened it up, and inside,
Wow.
we have, here we go. It says, the Texas business is making some noise here at the present moment. Santa Anna is driving General Houston before him. The garrison of La Baye, or Goliad, as well as that of San Antonio, have been cut off almost to a man. Houston, with a small force, much exaggerated I imagine, is falling back behind the Colorado. And then it goes on. But the Mexican War is where a lot of the soldiers in the American Civil War fought, both for the North and the South, and they were, of course, all on the same side back then. But a lot of the leading generals in the American Civil War fought together in the Mexican War,
Right.
and that's and they knew each other personally. They were roommates and did campaigns together.
Right. What's interesting is that people can find out a little bit about their homes too. The people that live at certain homes. Like there's one right here. Look at this. Great bargain. What does it say there? The 2 houses recently built by Samuel Waldron, situated on the corner of Broad and Water. Right? Everybody knows where those are.
Mm-hmm.
Well, actually, wait a minute. No, they're not there anymore.
They're probably not there.
That's where the
Maybe
that's where the town. No, the town buildings
Oh,
are.
the town buildings are? Yeah, one of those. These were the buildings that were there just prior to the town buildings being
Yeah,
built.
exactly.
Or
wow.
maybe they were destroyed in the fire,
Oh,
1846,
that's right, that's
possibly.
right.
The port of Nantucket, and it probably tells of the different ships that have arrived and the ones that are departing. And this is where you can, if you were to read this article and write down the ships, like I do, you can go to the library here in town, and there's a wonderful set of a multi-volume set of books on shipping that will tell you the history of these books, and that's what I do.
Of the ships?
Yeah.
Wow.
Then
You do that?
yeah. So then when I read I try to remember ships that came from Nantucket, and and then when I get my stamp catalogs with the Maritime Mail, something will ring a bell. So I get reading the newspapers, I get clues, and they give me leads and how to find things in relation to them.
Wow. How do you find time to do that? I mean, it must take a lot of time.
Oh, it takes me months. I mean, just in my spare time.
Just in your spare time.
Yeah.
So when you're
Yeah.
working and you're doing your carpentry that you do
Right.
during the day,
I'll be
when you
thinking.
you're thinking about
Yeah, I'll be thinking about it, but I can't.
what have you been thinking about lately while you're working?
Oh, I'm working on the Nantucket bank robbery. Has me fascinated.
It
At
does.
that moment, that's what I'm thinking about most right now.
Wow.
And so I want to get more papers in relation to that.
Okay.
And that's my goal. And that's what I'm going to work on, actually.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to work on getting things pertaining to Nantucket. Now, here's an ad
still in the Nantucket paper. It says, "Look at this," and it has two houses and a ship in between them. And it says, "The undersigned is duly authorized to sell and now offers for sale the dwelling house with about 34 rods of land thereunto belonging, which was formerly the homestead of Benjamin Slade, situated in that part of Nantucket called Newtown."
What?
I wonder where that was. Newtown. Also a large and commodious dwelling house with the land thereto belonging, now occupied by Nathaniel Talent, it looks like, adjoining the old North and Cross wharfs. Well, that building probably isn't there
North
anymore.
Wharf, sure.
And then also,
Cross Wharf.
the sloop named the Mediterranean, of the burthen of 70 tons or thereabouts. So that 70 tons would be fairly small.
Okay.
Because I can remember reading about I think that was about the size of the first whaling ships that Nantucket produced,
Mhm.
because they didn't have to really travel too far, so they were around 70 tons, I believe. And then when they started to go further out into the Pacific and that, they needed to, in staying out longer, they needed much larger ships. So, you could look up the sloop, the Mediterranean, and just see if it's listed in those books there.
Have you done it? Have you?
Not this one.
Not
No.
this one.
No.
How long would it take you to do something like that? To go and look it up?
Well,
Is it
just
very simple?
Matter of minutes. Yeah.
Is it really?
Yeah, it's just a set of books sitting on the shelf there. It has an index, and you look up the name of the ship, and then it'll say which volume the book is in, and it may only mention the ship in a sentence, or sometimes it'll mention where it was built and the tonnage and who the captain was and all a lot of the statistics.
You know what's kind of interesting about what we're doing right now?
What's that?
Is that we could be looking at, like, if the date on this is right, 1836, and the people started to go off farther and farther away from Nantucket, and maybe, as you said, the boat was built for not real long extended trips, that they're selling it as the lack of whales.
Oh, could be.
Right?
Oh, could be, yeah.
And so he's trying to get rid of it.
A sign of the times.
A sign of the times.
Oh, Sherlock Holmes.
Sherlock Holmes, man, you're narrowing it down.
Or as he would say, most singular.
Most singular.
Yeah, this is most singular.
Right.
Here we have a newspaper from England called The Sun, and it's from Monday, July 7th, 1794. And one reason why I got this paper was because it had a tax stamp on it. Not a stamp like you stick on an envelope, but they would charge the papers in order to raise money, a certain amount of money, as a revenue. So this is like a revenue stamp.
Here's a little newspaper from 1668. It was called the London Gazette. Wow. And at that time, this was about the standard size for a lot of newspapers back then. And I don't know the reason why. Maybe there was a shortage of paper, or the shortage of news, or the shortage of people that could read it. I'm not quite sure. But somebody has trimmed this on all sides, and they would call this closely cropped or closely trimmed to the print, because when it came off of the press, all the sides to it were ragged. The big reason is because they were made from rags. It's the material that they've been made from.
Right.
And remember, it's from 1668,
Mm-hmm.
and there's news from Spain, and they are talking about Don Juan here, the original Don Juan.
And it says, and I may pronounce some of the words wrong, but I think it goes on. It says, Father Nithard, the Queen's counselor, finding that Don Juan has vigorously pressed his retirement from public affairs, has offered the council to give him, and I can't make that word.
Satisfaction.
Satisfaction.
Because it says fatisfaction.
Okay, well, you're getting good at this.
See?
To take from him all pretensions on the side. But anyway, I guess he wants to retire from public life. His knees are probably weak by now, and he's tired. He wants to retire.
There's something about reading it in the paper that seems to mean more to me
Yeah. Well, you can
than
get it.
just to hear about it in a history book,
Right.
doesn't it?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, this is actually what other people read at the time. I mean, the actual paper. So here is I picked this engraving up of Abraham Lincoln at a island auction in the fall, and it was in its original frame. And what it is it's an engraving, and it's the artist's proof. And a proof in a print is once the artist has the plate worked so when it's inked and produces the print, he's satisfied with it, and he doesn't have to rework the print anymore, the plate anymore. And the print comes across satisfactory. The first few are what they call the artist's proof, and he usually keeps a few for himself, and then they mass produce the rest of them. And I would imagine that this particular print he was hired to make this by a publishing company, and this was pretty standard to do. And this was made in 1866, so it was made in honor, I'm assuming, in honor of Abraham Lincoln. And so he kept some proofs for himself, and they were probably maybe hundreds of these made, or I don't know how many would be made, but hundreds of them. But how many have survived, who knows? And if they have survived, what kind of condition are they in? But the fact that this is the artist's proof, and the art of, or the world of collecting, would make an artist's proof a lot more valuable or desirable than one that wasn't a proof. And this particular person was William E. Marshall, and he was a banknote engraver. You can see by Abraham Lincoln, it looks just like on the $5 bill and on the currency. And it's a beautiful engraving.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
It really is beautiful.
Yeah, very large. And I bought it because I like it, and it supposedly came from an island home. And what the history of it is, I don't know. I haven't looked it up yet.
You could find out.
Oh, I'm sure I could find out, yeah. But I haven't as yet.
Mm-hmm.
But I got it because I like the print, and I also collect prints, engravings, and etchings. And I'm a Civil War buff, and so that's why I bought it. And then when I purchased them, I went home and took them out of the frame, and I figured that it was in the original frame because of the nails and how it was matted and that. And so I was thinking if while I was taking it apart, I wonder if there were any old letters in it, because I didn't know if why somebody would have an engraving of Abraham Lincoln. I mean, maybe they had a relative that was in the Civil War, or they were just very patriotic. I don't know. I don't know the history of this yet.
Mm-hmm.
But when I did get it, I went out and purchased some old newspapers in relation to Abraham Lincoln, and I purchased some with his campaign ads. I have one with one of his first presidential campaign ads, but this one is when he was running for re-election, and his running mate was Andrew Johnson.
Mm-hmm.
And this particular paper has more war news in it, where they're calling up 500,000 men more in the draft. So it's a Civil War newspaper, but it pertains to Abraham Lincoln. And then I got another newspaper when Abraham Lincoln came out with the Emancipation Proclamation, which was after the Battle of Antietam. The Union was looking for a battle that they could say that they really won, that there was no question about it. And so that's when he issued the Emancipation Proclamation and freeing the slaves.
That's right.
Glad to share my hobby with everybody.
Oh, it's a wonderful hobby.
And then,
Maybe a few more people will be inspired by it after they see this.
right, or they'll want to see more shows.
Exactly.
Maybe I can show you how I wash newspapers. I could wash a newspaper
Yeah.
sometime,
Okay, we'd like that.
or I'll show you the story behind the crossed hammers.
All right.
Which is
We'll save that for another show.
or how I came up with that.
All right.
So,
Thank you, Brendan.
oh, you're welcome.